Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Bryan, and we got a whole host of people here this week. Let me see. I see, well, all these people have something in common. They're either, Miss Berlin's on. Hey, Miss Berlin.
Hey, yay.
And she's in a car somewhere.
I am.
Yep. So we have JB, Scott Pack, we have Dave Cybuck, and Karen. All of these people have something in common, and they're all the moderators or, just people who are on the regular podcast of Breaking Down Security. And I thought, well, it's the Christmassy time of year. You spend it with people you like, and then, people that you work with or, whatever. So I thought...
People that you're forced to be near.
Right. People that are forced to be here because, Miss Berlin, says she needs to be here. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you for joining, especially at this kind of short notice and this time of year. So I appreciate everybody coming on. Don't all answer at once.
So people you like, does that mean I need to hang up?
Yeah. No. Okay. So for long-time listeners, earlier this year, we had Miss Karen on. She's a director of Infosec on our Slack, and we had her on to talk about an active attack at her organization with social engineering and stuff, and probably one of the best podcasts of the year, I think. One of the top 45 that we did, I think, probably of the year. So, maybe everybody could go around and talk and introduce themselves. Dave, maybe you could start since you're at the top of the frame here.
Yeah, sure. Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm super excited for 2020. I thought 2019 was okay, but I think 2020 is going to be great.
Oh yeah.
Happy to be here too. I mean, moderating the Slack channel is good time. But I always enjoy any opportunity to get together with y'all, and that's good.
Yeah. Scott, we're going to go counterclockwise. So, Mr. Pack.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Yes, this is Scott Pack. You might know me from such productions as the Breaking Down Security podcast community Slack channel, where I'm known as Scott Pack.
Yeah.
Much as Mr. Bucky said, 2019 has been a very special and somewhat dumpster fire year, and while I am looking forward to closing this one out, there's some interesting things that look hopeful for 2020.
Very cool. Okay, JB, how about yourself?
Doing great, man. Good to hear everybody. I just drove up to spend some time with some family, and yeah, looking forward to having a chat. Just hanging out with somebody.
I'm going to try killing my audio. JB, kill your video a little bit just for our notification. I think there's some, yeah. It wouldn't be a web conference without, the bingo card being filled in. Can you hear me? I can see you. Can you hear me?
I am.
There you go.
I'm out in the middle of nowhere.
I'm just disappointed you won't hear any trains until I get home.
Oh, man. Okay. Well,
okay, so I'll make sure to take trains off the bingo card for this week.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Okay, can I get the dog to bark?
Yep.
And can you see my screen?
Yeah. Am I sharing? Am I sharing effectively? Yeah. So JB, I hear you're out in the middle of nowhere. You're hanging out with friends and family.
Yeah, family.
Right on.
Just drove up, worked all day, keeping the cybers safe.
Oh my. Yeah.
And
wow. Okay.
You're going to keep us safe now.
Am I? Okay. And Director of Infosec, tell everybody about how you're doing, what you're doing for Christmas.
Well, let's see. How am I doing? I have forgotten everything I know about security, and I'm the biggest security threat on earth. Because this year I was promoted to Chief Information Officer, so I am actually not in Infosec anymore. Although I sort of am, but the CISO reports to me now.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, we're gonna have to have a meeting with you on Monday about your credentials and stuff. So we're gonna have Gail from HR come in.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
it reminds me of the.
I might be underqualified.
Oh my.
It reminds me of the movie quote right? Like the mobster, right? Every time I try to get out, he'd pull me back in.
Yeah.
And he may be gone for now, but you'll be back.
Yeah.
Precisely.
It's all the same family, guys. CIO, same family.
That's true. So, Karen, what's the biggest change that you've noticed going from being the director of Infosec to the CIO? Obviously, it's even more or less hands-on than being a director or the CISO of a company. But what's the biggest hurdle that you've had so far working as a CIO?
Well, biggest hurdle or biggest difference? The biggest difference is the year-end budget is massive. My year-end bonus is massive compared to CISO. So I think money on both sides of the equation is the biggest difference. The hardest change is figuring out, with my true love being security, figuring out how much of that budget to give to my new CISO, who was something of a protege of mine. So. That's probably also the toughest thing is I want to give security more, but I know I can't.
Okay. That is interesting because, we hear that a lot of security organizations or, departments are underfunded, but like you're saying that you can't play favorites anymore. You don't have the authority necessary to play favorites in this case?
Sure. I have multiple teams who are looking for, who are coming to me with their hand out.
Right.
And, I would love to play favorites. And honestly, because my job is to protect the company still, I probably do play favorites towards security because when you're CISO or CIO, hopefully you're driving the company towards not making a massively expensive mistake. So I would, I would rather not upgrade that server or, hire another help desk person than I would see the company get compromised.
Right. Okay. All right. So I do have some questions. I'm sure we're not going to get to all of this, but I do have some show notes and stuff of some things that I was thinking of. Some people have added some bits here. So this is the end of the year for 2019. This is also the end of the decade for the podcast, and we're going to be heading on into the new decade here. I'm going to do a little roundtable thing. I'll start with whoever's at the top here. We'll go Mr. Cybuck, then JB, then Karen, then Ms. Berlin, and Scott. Are things better than they were 10 years ago, or they're better 5 years ago? I mean, are things better than they have been in or have they have they gotten worse? I'll start with David.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I'd like to say that things have gotten better, but I mean, objectively, I have a hard time pinpointing how much. Right? I mean, I think it's really easy to what's old is new again. People are still picking crappy passwords. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about awareness. The arguments or the conversations that you had 10 years ago are different. The ability to get better funding for certain things is a little different. I think like a net total, I think it's better. Even though some of the basic things that we complained about in, 2010, which doesn't feel like that long ago, I think some of those things are still in place. We're still fighting those battles. But I think everything being equal, I think things are better.
Cool. Okay. JB, how about you?
I have to give it a little shout out first. My connection earlier was messed up because I had the Slack feed of the Atomic Red Team project open, and it was just going crazy with pull requests. I think it gave me like 20 notifications right when you asked me what's going on, JB. So just got to shout out the Atomic Red Team project, and was always willing to talk about that a little bit.
Cool.
What was are things better than 10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, have things gotten better since 2010, or even better than in 2015, or why or why not?
I think you always have to look at the positive side. and then balance things out. It's so easy to focus on negative side. I joke with people, look at the Reddit page, positive news, instead of all the news outlets in your face. I mean, in the cyber world, so much progress has been made with detections, with closing the skills gap a little bit, hopefully. And I have to say, yes, things are way better. The average person is becoming much more security savvy.
Cool.
For example.
Okay. Director of Infosec, how about you?
I'm going to go with things have gotten neutral.
Okay.
I think I think there's more awareness. I think there's that people are generally want to be better, but I think we still haven't cracked the password problem. I think we still haven't gotten wide adoption on second factor. I think we still haven't gotten wide adoption on password management. I think we still haven't gotten wide adoption on hygiene, basic hygiene, because people want to want all these things to be true, but I don't believe, want to take the effort to make them true. So we have better tools, but the threat has gotten more advanced. Our tools are better, but the threat is better. So I think that's neutral. I think people are aware, but I don't think they're doing everything they need to do. So I would call it a wash. I think we're still fighting the same fights, just with at a higher level.
Right on. Ms. Berlin, how about you?
So I think, are we doing over the past 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely think with how popular breaches have gotten in the news, that at least the budgets are more. So
Okay.
people are at least spending more on security and infrastructure.
That's cool. Okay. That makes sense. All right. Mr. Pack, how about you?
I feel pretty similarly to Miss Karen. We still struggle with some of the same basic things that we were dealing with 10 years ago. When you look at, so take the OWASP Top 10, for instance. While that has changed a little bit recently, it's been pretty dang static almost the entire time. But on the other end, some of the tool chains that we have now are pretty freaking phenomenal for actually figuring out what's happening. Our detection routines are actually working now. When I think about what I was doing professionally 10 years ago, it was hand managing 30 plus snort sensors across an enterprise.
Right.
And nowadays we can do everything from one place. I'm also thinking about some of the conversations we're having even outside of InfoSec. Right before I came down, I was actually talking to my wife about password breaches and what's actually gotten out there, giving her a training session on have I been pwned, and even being able to have that conversation with her retired mother. Those are conversations 10 years ago we could never have happened.
Okay.
So while I think as an industry, we're probably roughly in the same spot as far as maturity goes, a lot more people are actually aware of what's happening and seem to be willing and able to actually make a difference.
Okay.
I have a thought. Can I add something to this?
Yes, please.
So to the people here that study malware, for example, right? When did we see the rise of the exploit kit, like the mass? I don't want to say mass produced, but the commercially available exploit kit for malware delivery, right? So I'm thinking back to when we read the books like Mastermind or Kingpin, and we saw the darknet rise with the introduction of Bitcoin, right? And then all these other little factors where the technology changed and it pulled the industry along.
Right.
Our adversaries, would they say that the last 10 years were better or worse? I'm thinking our adversaries would say the last 10 years were better. I don't know. What do you guys think about malware exploit kits and that introduction and what that did for the success of our adversaries?
That's a really good point of a trend, right? That's definitely been one of the strong trends, even of the past 1 or 2 years. And there's definitely some adversaries, so to speak, out there making some serious bank. If you just look at the statistics that were thrown around from the sextortion bit, even though they were all over the place, even the smallest number was pretty huge.
Cool. Okay. Amanda, Karen, do you have anything you'd like to add to that, or we can go ahead and move along?
I think that from my perspective, though, we really started with the exploit kits with the rootkits almost 20 years ago, or maybe 20 years ago. So I think those have been on the rise and getting more advanced, but I think we're better able to detect them and have, as much as I hate to say artificial intelligence or neural networking or deep learning or any of that other garbage, I think some of that stuff is actually working at finding behavior of these kits rather than trying to look at their signatures. So I would say the tools have gotten much better for addressing those kits. Okay, cool.
Right on. All right. Let me go back to our. All right. So I had a section here called Good, Bad, and Ugly. So one of the questions that I thought of, I was driving around today, and one of the questions I thought of was because recently it hasn't been recently in the news, but it seems like between small towns, healthcare providers, assisted living facilities, elementary schools in particular, there have been a lot of ransomwares of those things, and they have very, typically they don't have very good IT support, or they don't think about security in terms of why are we targeted, and they end up getting ransomware for untold amounts of money, or some of the later ones have been for no ransom. So my question is, I was thinking, well, what industries are actually doing a good job of securing themselves? And I didn't have a really long list. Actually, I only had one that I could possibly even comment on, and that would have been the financial area. But there have been several banks, and of course we have Equifax, which I would consider to be financial. Are there any industries that are actually doing a good job of securing themselves? I'll start with Amanda.
I mean, I'd agree with you. I think my financial customers are doing a better job defensively and with sending us logs and being compliant than any other vertical.
Okay.
Definitely not manufacturing. Definitely not healthcare. Yeah, I mean, financial comes a little closer, I guess. Or if you want to look at tech companies as an industry, even then, there's a lot of tech companies that don't even take security into consideration.
Okay.
I don't know. Infosec companies, I guess, if you want to consider a little tiny vertical, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's fair. Director of Infosec, how about you?
Well, I'd like to say financial, but then I look at all the Trojans that we find on phones that are attacking financial, for example.
Right.
And of course Equifax, like you listed, and whatnot. I wish retail as a whole were doing a good job. It doesn't appear necessarily that it is, but I think the question that I have is, can we look at this with all other factors removed, or do we need to look at how big the threat is for these things? How frequently are these industries being attacked? And if I'm not in that industry, I don't know if I can call it. For example, if you take ransomware, we see 20 to 50 samples of ransomware a day.
Wow. And
have never had an issue with stopping it long before it became a threat.
Right.
So, I'm shocked to see how frequently people fall to this ransomware.
Right. Okay. JB, you work for a fairly decently sized retail organization. How does it look in your ball court there?
Well, yeah, of course, the opinions here are just my own opinions, hanging out with friends here. But I'd say retail is really strong, and we've got strength in numbers. And you have to look at, I think, a more important question is, how can everyone work together? Like not only in inter-company within sectors, but forget about the sectors. Like what strengths can we pull from each other and from different kinds of industries, and get some knowledge sharing and even tactic sharing. I was at the SANS Threat Hunting Summit last fall, and one of the most interesting talks was a lady from an organization that tracks human trafficking. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing to get people not only volunteering to help her and make a difference in so many young lives, but also learn what you could take from threat hunting out of that crime fighting and human trafficking situation.
Okay.
But retail has its own issues, just like every sector does. You have all the mage card happening, and you heard about it in the news with one of the other retailers, and everybody's got their headline right now, but the synergies is what I would focus on.
Right. Oh, and yeah, these folks, all of our opinions here don't necessarily reflect our employers' past, present, future. So I might actually start putting that on podcasts because somebody had suggested I do that at work, not and joking, but I'm thinking, maybe I do need to start putting that just for, shits and giggles. So I may put that at the beginning of the podcast as well. So, Scott, you're kind of ancillary to the healthcare field. What does it look like for you?
So currently I work in manufacturing, which, I made that jump almost 2 years ago.
My bad.
Which
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Which as Amanda mentioned, it's not great as an industry. Even with my time in healthcare, I thought it was actually less not great.
Wow.
But if I go back about 6 years, I spent a good long time in higher ed, and while we had lots of issues, primarily related to how the different departments worked with each other, excuse me, we as a whole, I thought we did surprisingly well there. And touching on what JB mentioned, we had incredible information sharing resources. Because the best industry information sharing I've had was at education.
Okay. And David, maybe you could talk a little bit about, how you feel about the whole thing, which industries are doing a good job. Dave, are you muted?
There we go. So what I wanted to say was I care about and pay attention to public safety, like small government agencies running police, fire, ambulance. Right, I care about that, and I think if the news is any indicator, I think they're struggling. Right? You have Atlanta, Baltimore, New York, Akron, Ohio,
Pensacola, and New Orleans
Texas,
in the same
the
week.
state of Texas.
There was a good number of Texas cities. Yeah, Pensacola and New Orleans were the latest that I've heard of. Maybe there's been some others.
Bad. Yeah, I mean, it's as we're speaking. If there was someone somewhere in a foreign country with their eyes on some municipality in the state of California, I wouldn't be surprised. Right? They are and I don't know how they're going to crack that code, solve that problem. Right? Yeah. If you look at the things that are working against them, they're working right into the attacker's hands. So, for example, right, you have organizations strapped for budget without their ability to do their own IT, right? So forces them to go out and get help, right? The attackers know this, right? And it's not just one agency in a state. It could be 4, 5, 20-some, and they'll all contract with this one vendor,
right?
And the attackers know, like, hey, they can't afford to do their IT. They're going to go to company X, and they're going to get it all there. So all I have to do is get into company X, and I can get my malware into however many places.
Yeah.
And the factors that make them such a great target and the factors that make them so soft are not going to change overnight. Like, they're in place, and it's an uphill battle. So, I mean, as far as all the industries go, the one that I care about a lot is going to have some serious challenges.
Right. Okay. All right.
Now, may I beat a drum for a moment?
Yes, please.
So let me just toss out here, and I don't know how the reception ultimately would be, but let me just toss out here for a moment. If you're looking for some place to present your security talk, and you're wanting to, come in at a high level, and I won't say dumb it down, but dumb it down. The echo chamber of presenting that at, Black Hat, woohoo, look, that's awesome. Congratulations. But I think making a difference, we have the NRF, the National Retail Federation. We have the Retail Industry Association, Retail Industry Leaders Association. You have each of your state retail associations. All of these have massive conferences every year. Have you tried presenting there? I think, if you look at the industry associations, maybe going into those associations and making security presentations on your favorite topic that is related to them may end up actually making a difference in that arena itself, rather than making these high-level differences that take a lot of time to trickle down.
Cool. So, Karen, I have a question about that. So, how does one submit to those things? Is there, it seems like us in Infosec, we have, massive calendars, and everybody knows when the major conferences are going on. When do these, retail conferences occur? And I mean, what kind of audience are we looking at there? What kind of, what kind of message should we be pushing? I mean, some folks are like, oh, hey, cool, I got this tool and it's going to hack all your things and whatever. And, that's not what a retailer is going to want to hear necessarily. These are like, senior manager types, right, at these conferences?
I think there's a lot of senior management types at these conferences. But I think it's also a lot easier. If I try to get the budget to go to almost any security conference, the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
If I try to get the budget to go to our state retail industry conference, the answer is automatically yes.
Mm.
Because your senior most management is seeing, hey, there is an obvious direct line to these things.
Mm-hmm.
As far as presenting at them, they all have calendars. They all have, guidelines for presenting. So I would look directly to and I don't think it's just retail. I think it's every segment that you might want to go into. I don't think it happens very frequently, and I don't know how well it would be received.
Uh-huh.
But it seems to me that because it's unique, it might actually be well received.
Yeah.
And I think there's less barrier to making it in there.
Yeah. My question about those is, okay. So like I just did a search on Google for e-commerce or retail conference sites or, conferences and stuff. And there's one called the Texas E-commerce that happened November 5th and 6th, 2019, Omni Dallas Hotel in Dallas. 400 plus e-commerce professionals together to share knowledge, learn, and evolve their customer acquisition strategy. Some of these, this one sounds like this where security may not fit in there. Are there any kind of particular conferences where we might want to look at?
Yeah, look at the National Retail Federation conference.
Retail Federation. Because my suggestion and challenge to folks who are listening who, I went to 5 conferences last year, I spoke at all of them, would be like, you're just, we get that echo chamber that everybody's talking about and everybody's just talking the same thing to one another. And maybe we should look at, maybe not going to a security conference and, and go to one of these conferences. Probably a little more formal than our, typical, DerbyCon or, Circle City Con or what have you. But Yeah, I was just Gwyneth Paltrow is going to be at the one in 2020 at the National Retail Federation. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, so that would be interesting to see how they do CFPs or, what they expect from somebody who's trying to give a talk there. So cool.
If we look at the Retail Industry Leaders Association, there's Link 2020, which is the retail supply chain. There's retail asset protection. There are quite a number of conferences that happen all throughout the year for that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, here's one February 23rd through the 26th, 2020 Link Retail Supply Chain Conference. Yeah. Okay. And it's in Dallas, Texas. Well, I'll be damned. Okay. So February 23rd through the 26th.
The Retail Asset Protection Conference in May.
Okay.
Also in Dallas. So,
very cool.
Anyway, I won't beat that drum too hard, but just a thought that's been percolating back there.
No, that's great. I mean, I think that, we've got a lot of talented folks in Infosec who could go to professional conferences like this and probably do more good than just, going to, and I don't want to use Circle City Con in this case, but I'm going to because it's the one that come to mind. But, going to Circle City Con and talking about security there versus going to a retail conference and you'd actually get, a different ear, somebody who might take this back as senior management and go, look, I saw this guy who told me, I can do X, Y, and Z for, $5 and gain access to networks. So, there's links in the show notes to the nrf.com and Retail Insights event calendar. So there, if you're interested in checking those out. So, okay. Well, I don't want to keep us for too much longer, because it's the end of the year. We have predictions because, nobody's going to remember these in 12 months anyway. What I don't want is, we've wrote some down. We have a couple of them. I'm going to ask people who haven't put anything down yet to put out a prediction. If they, and I hate to put Amanda on the spot, but since she doesn't have one in here, I'll go ahead and ask her first. What is a future prediction for you? It doesn't have to be in 2020. It could be, 5 years from now, we're going to have flying cars and, the aliens are going to be licking on our brains.
5 years from now, we're all going to have implanted chips and we're going to have to worry about that IoT.
Wow. So dystopia is what you're saying. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Director of InfoSec, how about you?
Things are looking up.
Oh, yeah? Okay. So Director of InfoSec, how about you? What's your future and hopefully not dystopian like Ms. Berlin's?
Mine might be more dystopian in that I think it's going to be more of the same. I think we're going to get in front of some of this stuff, but we're going to fall behind other parts of this stuff. And I think we're going to be talking about the same data breaches with a different name. And I think that the path that they take to get in will be exactly the same, but probably a little different.
Okay. All right. That's fair. JB, how about yourself?
It's funny Amanda mentioned this dystopia because when you talked about conferences, I was reminded of one of our BrakeSec people, Vic VIQ, who spoke at a conference called Monitorama in Europe, where he talked about his medical device and how to monitor that on his own body. So a little shout out. But as far as prediction, I would say I think we're going to see a big change in the way people approach social media. We've already seen some big movements away from some of the legacy ones, and I don't know what it is, but I think we're going to see something big happen, whether it's legislation or a big fine or just a complete generational shift. It's not going away, but in the way people approach it, maybe more mobile driven.
Right on. Okay. So Mr. Cybuck, you have one in here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wrote down, I predict a uptick in surveillance tech, and both kinds, right? The kind that looks like a smart device you put in your house that makes your life way better. Mm-hmm. And then just straight up, hey, we're going to put listening devices and cameras and sensors of some kind or another all over your city. And we're going to combine all that information aggregate it, and use the results of that big data search to make your life better and more secure. And then once you have an uptick in that kind of surveillance tech, I think the response is going to be legislation focused on privacy, applications and software and other technologies to counter and protect people's privacy.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know that I don't know for the UK folks that are listening, but some of them might have said "Welcome to London," because I do remember there's roughly 25,000 cameras or something. The last I heard was in London, and I know that the ability of law enforcement here in the Seattle area to put up cameras for monitoring people has been very much a sticking point for fans of privacy up here in Seattle and the Pacific Northwest area. So I don't completely disagree with your suggestion there. I mean, they've had red light cameras for years, and they've only started taking them out because of the need, because they don't actually generate the revenue that they say they are. Okay, so Scott, you also did not inject anything here. How's everything for you? What are you thinking about?
So, with some of the changes such as GDPR, in Europe really taking off, and then the new California bill 327 covering internet connected devices. Between those two, I'm actually thinking we're going to see a lot more legislation around security, whether it be privacy or just enforcing good security practices.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but I just have the sneaky suspicion that we're actually going to see a lot more legislation coming out.
Okay. All right. For myself, I actually am going the way of kind of a neutral thing. I'm seeing the rise of vetting programs. There are several companies out there. One, and to full disclosure, I'm actually working on one right now. They have decided that they want to add a basic level of security for companies that want to use their services. So one of the requirements is a pen test, making sure they have basic security in place for their deployment environments. Also making sure that the APIs that the company allows them to use are being used properly. As we've seen with things like the Capital One hack recently, and a bunch of other ones with the hacker Erratic. She got in and was poking around at a bunch of information. People asked Amazon, "Why didn't you do anything to stop this?" And they're like, "Well, all this stuff worked as intended. S3 buckets are open, and companies are required to lock those down, and they work as intended." And I think what a lot of companies like the Amazons and the Apples and the Microsofts of the world is, they're going to say, "Well, if you want to play in our environment, you're going to have to follow these rules. And if you don't want to play in that environment, then you're not going to be using our APIs, or you're not going to be, integrating yourself with Azure AD if you're not using things like MFA." So I see a bigger push towards requiring all developers to have MFA. I think I saw something recently from, I want to say it was GitHub or somebody, but there were, no, I'm sorry. It was, oh God, I wish I'd looked that up. It was some open source project were requiring MFA on some of their people for commits or something like that. I see the rise of vetting programs because companies are tired of taking the blame for things. They want to be able to hold these, 2 and 3 person companies, or these, guys who create this plugin overnight, and it's, on the Apple Store, and, yes, it does one thing, but it'll also open up a shell from your mobile device. They want to have some vetting in place to do that. So I'm thinking that we're going to start seeing more of that, where you're not going to be able to even be on the Apple Store until you have an assessment letter. So there may be a lot of work coming out in the next 2 to 3 years for various companies, depending on what the relationships are with these bigger companies to do these vetting, because there'll be penetration companies coming, and I'm sure there'll be a rise of the trust waves of the world, or the pen test puppy farms that are going to do that. Just give you a letter for paying $500. But for now, I think we're going to see a rise in these kinds of programs. So, anybody else have any other thoughts or anything like that?
To put Mr. Cybuck in perspective and related to what you said, now, with full disclosure, I come out of a CCTV background, developing CCTV hardware, firmware, software, etc. All the way back in 2013, the London Transit Authority had more than 15,000 cameras under their control just in the underground alone. The number in London is probably closer to 750,000, probably closer to one camera for every 12 people in all of London.
Jesus, that's a lot.
I would still predict an uptick. Right, when we think of surveillance, we think of with our senses, right? Sight, sound, smell, and taste, touch. But once you're talking about sensors pulling in data, it's not limited to that, right? Cell phone location data even has its own extra elements, right? You start combining all that information, and the software's ability to identify people or identify behaviors, or to mix content from multiple sensors at the same time from different angles on a situation. I think it's come a long way from being able to go back and look at some tape in the underground. I think that's going to just keep growing and growing because I think there's some real value there if done right. It's just a matter of making sure that all of the privacy components are also in place. And I think the tech will outrace that, which will cause people to get, appropriately so, worried about their own privacy.
Yeah, because you already see like retail stores, right, tracking customers and tracking their eye movement, and all of that is just going to get worse or better depending on which side you're sitting on.
So, for folks who I'm going to put out something and see if anybody disagrees with me. So, parts of California, I think San Francisco did it, and then California did it. They're outlawing some sorts of facial recognition technologies in the state and in certain areas. Are we going to see more states passing those kinds of laws that are banning that kind of technology? And do you think that's good or bad? Anybody who disagrees with me or has any input?
You can't stop the signal, Mel. I think yes, there is going to be legislation around that, but ultimately, you can't put this genie back in the bag, and you can't put your cat back in the bottle. This is going to grow, and perhaps it can be slowed down, but it certainly can't be stopped.
Right. Okay. So let me.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, well, I would definitely agree with that because I've been reading and hearing more about. So Amanda mentioned the retail side of monitoring and even tracking people's eye movements, but even some stores that have built-in apps, setting up beacons throughout the stores so that not only can they see what you're searching for, but also where exactly you are in the store and how long you spend in particular portions of particular aisles. So even without extra cameras, it's just getting a little unnerving, right? How tight some of that tracking can get.
Well, we
run Google beacons in our outlet stores. Absolutely. We have many beacons in the store, and those are actually provided to us for free by Google. So that's probably even more frightening.
Do you have Director Infosec? Do you have any control over how that data is shared, or are they just basically giving them to you? You plug them in, they get powered up, they get an IP address, and then they start beaconing. Bobby sat near the workout gear for 12 minutes or something. I'm going to add that to his bit. Do you have any control over what data is being sent from those to Google, or is it a wide open field?
No, that's kind of their sales pitch on that is all I do is peel the double stick tape off the back, slap it someplace, and they take care of the rest. So, they give me pretty reports in my analytics, but ultimately it's a ginormous invasion that people don't even see coming. I mean, these things are only a couple inches and a couple inches by a half an inch. They're smaller than a magnetic sensor on top of your door for your alarm, and you just walk in, peel the double-sided tape, slap them, and walk away, and they figure out the rest.
Wow. Okay. So
I've heard from folks in the fast food industry that a lot of companies are getting third-party data from the license plate tracking and using it for tracking. I don't know if anyone has a comment on first person comment on that, but I had always assumed as an individual that was coming from a law enforcement point of view, but apparently there's companies widely vending all that data.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I would definitely enjoy maybe having another discussion about the privacy issues with regards to some of that stuff, and whether or not the information that's being collected by Google is actually helpful in that respect. Director Infosec, we can talk about that offline, though. I don't want to open that can of worms just yet, because hopefully you'll be able to give us some or not, whatever. Anyway, let me see. Anything else? So let me ask a question. I would just do a lighthearted bit here. So where were you 10 years ago? What and do you look back, because I'm not recognizable now when I look at pictures of myself from 2010, mainly because the last 2 years has been very transformational for me. But I'm going to start with Dave because he's right underneath me in the list here. What were you doing 10 years ago, and did you think you'd be right here where you are now?
Yeah, wow. Memory lane, right? So 2010, internal audit at a financial services company, working with, what was the situation? It was companies doing some of their own IT, but the bigger organization wanting everyone to start following better information security practices. Mm-hmm. And we would travel. I was doing a lot of travel. I was going to different places around the world. And we would do little pen tests of these organizations to see where their major risks were, and then highlight the areas where they needed to get better, all with the ultimate goal of getting everyone at least the same standard. And no, I mean, I would never would have guessed. I mean, a lot of the technologies I work with today, I wasn't even thinking about, didn't even exist. Right now, my focus is mostly on development teams. Back then, it was a strong IT and information security focus or network security focus. Man, things have changed a lot in 10 years. Okay. No, I mean, I never would have guessed things would have gone their way. I mean,
right on.
No, it's amazing, and it's pretty exciting too. I mean, just what's it going to be like in 2030?
Yeah,
I have no idea.
Yeah, Scott, how about yourself?
See, with 10 years ago, I was the youngest member of a still relatively new information security team in higher ed. And for the most part, I was just doing minor tools development and network monitoring for that. I mean, so still interesting, fun stuff. But if I were to think back, or if I were to try and put myself in, in 30-year-old Scott's brain and think, what would he be doing now? I mean, these days, I can't say my job has changed significantly. I mean, now I'm doing more proper engineering work instead of analyst. But otherwise, now I'm the old guy on the team. While I'm not doing management, I'm definitely doing a lot more team lead role, both for my local team and then also for some of my global colleagues, and trying to figure out that balance of, do I get frustrated when my own work gets interrupted by a junior team member asking questions, or do I just shut up and help them and recognize that now that I'm old, that's what I do?
Understood. Okay. JB, how about yourself?
Well, I'd have to echo a lot of those same things. 10 years ago, I was doing one of my earliest security contracting gigs on a return to security and IT after some time making some music and doing some things in other industries. And I have to say what made the biggest difference was the community factor. And I know it's a little cliche, but like during that today minus 10 year up till now, like I learned about current job from you guys joking around on BrakeSec. You know, that wasn't 10 years ago, but it was like 4 years ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you started the book club almost 3.5 years ago or something, and we were doing the European book version of the book club.
Yeah.
And all of these community things have helped me shape. I can't say that I would have guessed it 10 years ago because we were able to learn so quickly and adapt that in our organizations, we're able to shape our careers and knowledge and better our companies.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Director of Infosec, how about you?
I love how humble everybody is here. But let me go the opposite direction because I'm old.
No.
10 years ago, I was the CTO for a company doing these surveillance cameras, I never would have thought I'd be working in retail because retailers were my clients or my clients' clients. But yes, I did see coming 10 years ago, slapping up a low resolution security camera was $1,000.
Right.
I did see coming today where slapping up a high resolution security camera is $15 to $20.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I went, hey, I better find something else to be doing with my time because this ain't going to go anywhere. So, I did get to see the advancement in this surveillance technology, so in 10 more years, these things are going to be, $2.50,
Right.
and they're going to slap themselves up. And you might laugh, but I really don't think that's that far-fetched.
Sure.
So I think that space has come incredibly far to the point where if you don't have 20 cameras on your house, what are you doing? And that was totally not the case 10 years ago, completely not the case 10 years ago. And it's been a massive change in that space.
Okay. Miss Berlin.
Oh gosh, no, none of you would have ever recognized me 10 years ago. I didn't even know there was a security industry.
Oh wow. Okay.
I was 25 and I worked at a help desk. And that was it. I had a very boring life.
Well, everybody starts out in the help desk at some point, right?
Yeah, I loved it. I worked at a hospital, and I had stayed there for 7 years, learning most of what I know about sysadmin stuff,
right?
And network admin and all of that kind of stuff. I've accomplished a lot and changed a lot as a person in 10 years, and I'm much happier now than I was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Myself, I guess I haven't gone yet. 10 years ago, I was working for a defense contractor, and I thought it was so cool because they were going to pay me to go get my CISSP and let me go to a class and get that. And I got that. And the minute I got it, I was like, oh man, I'm like pimp shit now and everything. Then I get on Twitter and they're like, your CISP sucks. And I was like, well, one of the excuses I heard was that, once people get their CISPs, they just, sit around and do nothing and they don't do anything to, contribute back. And it was kind of germinated me to the point where I was like, okay, well, I started listening to podcasts, Paul Security Weekly, Risky Business, couple others, Southern Fried Security and those, and, it got me to the idea of, maybe I could do one of my own. And I agonized, and I've talked about this, I've agonized for a year or so before I finally got to the gumption to actually start BrakeSec. And I actually did it because, I was trying to, I was like, well, if, Paul and them can get cool jobs working for, Tenable and all that, I'm just, poor nobody here. I could go and, be CISO of something myself. And, it's really the first 4 years of this decade probably sucked. And then I got on at CrowdStrike. And I don't mention this a lot on the show because I did for the first 3.5 years of the podcast work for them. So because they had a massive sales and marketing team, I never mentioned them on the show because I was like, they've already got enough people doing stuff. They don't need my piddly ass podcast or piddly ass podcast to pimp out their product. And one, I still have some people that I worked there with, and they're awesome. But I didn't want to be vendory. I wanted to kind of keep that agnostic feeling because I didn't want it to be like, end up becoming the CrowdStrike podcast with Bryan Brake or anything weird like that. But in the last 5 years of this decade, the community building, I think, was one of the things I learned after I got laid off from that same defense contractor in 2012 was that I didn't know how to network. And I gave a talk about this at Tag Northwest this year. Wait, what? JV, you killing me, dog. So, I gave a talk about that and I got laid off and I didn't know anybody outside of the people I worked with. And I didn't have any way of finding a job. So, I joined the ISSA locally there in Austin, and I, was hitting on people. I was like, hey, you hiring, da, da, da. And I didn't even know how to network. I was tossing resumes and stuff and nothing was happening and I didn't know why. And I got picked up eventually, thankfully by a consulting company. It was awesome for them to do that. But I realized at that point that I needed to create a network or create a nebulous area of people around me that I could use or lean on or ask questions or mentor or mentee, be. And, part of that was starting the podcast and some of that was just getting out and meeting people. I was severely introverted the podcast has I'm sure been more rewarding for me just in terms of all the people that it's helped versus, what it's done for me professionally. Professionally, I've gone from being a blue teamer to now the scariest job that I've ever done to date. And the most challenging was being a project manager at my current company. And, I realized about, 4 years or 3 years ago, about the same time I started the podcast, that I was never going to be technical. I saw these cool talks and I was like, yeah, I'm never going to be popping shells. And I was like, well, I need to be managing the people who pop the shells because, at least I can speak, somewhat their language and understand. So persnickety platypus. Yes. Very well done, Scott. We're chatting here. We shouldn't be chatting, but we are. Anyway. So, the last 5 years has just been trying to give back as much as I can to the community. I know Mr. Betcher and myself and Miss Berlin, we try to go out every week and put out something that somebody will at least go, on, I don't know how Miss Berlin feels about all that.
I don't know. As long as people laugh at me, that's usually what I go for.
No. Laugh with you. Laugh with you.
Oh, right. No, laugh with us. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean,
yeah.
I can add something to that if that's okay.
Please do.
Nope.
So, if I didn't think about it until JB said something about community, but 10 years ago, what I was doing, I would have felt like I was doing it alone.
Yes.
Right. That I was making enough as I went along, or was sort of on my own, solving my own problems that no one else had. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's one thing that's changed over the last decade. I realized there's a broader community that has similar problems. Some people have solved it already, and we're willing to work together on that.
Right.
And then the podcast, Breaking Down Security, was probably not the first one I listened to, but it was the first one to have a serious positive impact on my professional career. And I remember the podcast. I think I've mentioned it before. It was the ones with Bill Semth and maybe Jim Manico the first time when they were talking about the OWASP proactive controls. I'm like, oh, right. So there's these things we could do with software to make them better. And we can go beyond like a scan or a pen test where you throw like rotten results back at the developer and say, hey, you suck. I'm like, oh, wow, you can do that. And then I started using the things from the CAD, learning those things, putting them into my own practice. And that actually grew into a large part of what I'm doing today. And then instead of just saying, thank you, Bryan, you helped me move my career in a positive direction. I think the ability to moderate or to help with the Slack, I feel like I'm still paying it back, and I haven't paid it all back yet, but I'm enjoying every moment, right? That's just take the opportunity to say thank you to this podcast and all the people that have supported it along the way, because that's been hugely wonderful, in so many different ways, this group and that opportunity. That's something that's changed a lot over 10 years. It's not feeling alone, and that's been really helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah, and if I can dogpile on that a bit.
Sure.
So if we go back to the magic 10-year number, then, at that time I was working for a university I had another 5 other people on my security team, but we were in an isolated town that was honestly the 5 of us, or the 6 of us, were the only security community in about a 45 to 60 minute drive. And it really wasn't until a few years after that when I actually made it to Columbus, Ohio, where David mentioned Bill Simp, when I ran into him at an event here, and then started seeing some of the B-Sides events coming up, and running into Amanda when she spoke at a local B-Sides. And then getting included getting involved in this podcast and the community there, and meeting Bryan at Derby. It's the difference just in the community building over the last 10 years has been incredible. That feeling of leaving one of those events and realizing that I'm not actually doing this all by myself, that there are other people that have the same problems, was quite uplifting. It didn't feel even though none of the problems actually fundamentally changed, it didn't feel nearly as overwhelming to actually get to talk to other people and find out that, yeah, we're all dealing with the same garbage.
Cool. All right, Karen, I know, we didn't hit you up there. How what were you thinking about the community? When we invited you, I was just enamored with your personal style and everything you were doing inside of the Slack. So, one, I appreciate you for becoming a moderator, but has it had any effect on your career in any way?
I'm sorry, was that directed at me?
Yeah.
I was actually and unfortunately my thunder got robbed, because I was saving for the end that I wanted to to send out a shout out to the BrakeSec podcast and specifically your guests. When I was in college, I had a physics professor tell me, if an old physicist tells you something is possible, it almost certainly is. If he tells you it's impossible, it almost certainly isn't. And I really appreciate the guests of your podcast and BrakeSec for giving them the forum, because your guests and most of the listeners here and yourselves on the call, you folks represent the future of security. I'm security past, and you folks are security future, and it's really positive for me to be able to have a glimpse into security future, even though I know I'm on the downswing, and I'm not going to have the impact that you folks are. But by the same token, it's really positive to be able to see that future, the vision of that future coming forward from what you all are working on.
Fantastic. I think that's probably a good place to stop, and I don't want to mar it with anything else. I do want to thank also Megan Roddy, who, if I could be honest, in about the 5 or 6 years of podcasts that we've done on almost a weekly basis, this is roughly 296 episodes around here. Actually, probably. Anyway, so we did that show with Megan Roddy, and me and Mr. Betcher at the time were just so enamored with everything that had happened with Megan, and the minute we had her join our Slack, it just seemed like an awesome fit to have her involved. And if you haven't had a chance to hear her discussion on neurodiversity and hiring folks who may or may not be on the spectrum, I suggest you go back and find that one and download it, because it was probably one of the top 5 episodes I think we've ever done in the entire run of the podcast thus far. And very ancillary and actually very, very pertinent to Miss Berlin's initiatives with mental health. And
I mean, if it weren't for the podcast, I wouldn't have met Megan, and she is, without her, I wouldn't be able to do the nonprofit.
It's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and of course my partner in crime, my brother in Infosec, Mr. Betcher, couldn't be here tonight. He's actually up in Dallas with his family, so he wasn't able to make it. We'll talk to him after the first of the year, but he's been here the whole time, and it's been great. Even with all of his becoming a filthy developer of LogMD and what have you, and he's. I've had people tell me, we'd love to hear Mr. Betcher talk. He's so much, he sounds so much more articulate and smarter than you. And I was like, oh, okay. He is. Everybody on this show.
Wait, who says that?
I've deleted the emails. It was not a very positive email. That was probably the most positive comment, the whole email. So we do.
Goodness.
Yeah. Well,
I'm right here, Bryan.
Come at me. Come at me, bro.
Come at me, bro. No, I always have people on that I know that are smarter than me, because I know there's always something I can learn from them. Having Miss Berlin come on the show was a no-brainer as well, because, I saw her at DerbyCon. We did our podcast with podcasters. I think it was the second one. And she was working with a podcast for her pen testing company. And then all of a sudden they just went away. And I asked her, I was like, what was going on? She's, oh yeah, there's issues. And I was like, oh, okay. And the next thought after that was, man, we should get her on our show. She's awesome. And so, I asked Mr. Betcher, and he's like, yeah, absolutely. And
now you can't get rid of me.
It's like a rash. You're like the rash of BrakeSec.
That's not the first time I've heard that.
No, you are not a rash. You're you helped out, and you're still helping out and doing a lot of great things with mental health hackers, and you always bring some needed spice to the podcast, which I appreciate. And I'm hoping we'll be here in 2030 doing the same thing, talking about, back in the day we had ransomware, and now we've hijacked brains and, stuff like that. I'm hoping we, end up with Johnny Mnemonic kind of stuff or something. I don't know. But, so before we go, Miss Berlin, I'm going to go ahead and do like we normally do. Everybody tell how they can get a hold of you if they want to talk to you about anything that they're interested in talking to you about, even if it's, hey, I heard you on the podcast. So start with Amanda.
Yeah, so definitely Twitter at InfoSister, INFOSYSTIR. And for all mental health related things, it's at Hackers Health.
Right on. David?
I would love people to get in touch with me. It's Twitter's probably the best, or the BrakeSec Slack, DP Cybuck, on both, DP CYBUCK, and on Twitter I also use, depending on what I'm talking about, Give Infosec, GIVEINFOSEC. Both would be great ways to get in touch, depending on what you want to talk about. If it's resumes, career, managing those things, hiring, getting hired, Give Infosec is probably the best. Everything else.
Awesome.
Yeah, just DPCYBUCK.
Awesome. Karen.
So you'll find me at Consulting CSO on the Twitters, and as far as the Slack goes, quite honestly, speaking of incurable rashes, you can't avoid me. So hopefully that doesn't chase anyone away. But if you show up on the Slack, you're gonna find me.
You're a consulting CSO? What? Yeah, no.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I know.
I know you know that.
Yeah, I know. JB.
Yeah, definitely Twitter at Cherokee JB _ is the best and preferred method. And feel free to reach out. I have DMs open, and I'm on a number of Slack communities with that same handle. And I think the next conference or something, I'm going to be doing a simulcast moderator at SANS, the big one in Orlando, with Hal Pomerantz in the Unix class. So, come give me a shout out.
Okay. Well, that was everybody. There was nobody else that we needed to do that was important at all. So I'm just kidding. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah. So I occasionally twit at PackScott, or you can find me on the BrakeSec podcast community Slack channel, spewing forth nonsense and occasionally what I assume to be intelligent conversation at Scott Pack.
There you go. Cool. So Megan Roddy, who's another one of our, we talked about her. Her Twitter is Megan, MEGAN _ Roddy, RODDIE, like Roddy Piper. That's how I have to remember it, because otherwise it's like Roddy, and it's like, no, that's not right. Mr. Betcher, you can find him at BetcherPwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. Nobody else spelled theirs, and I just realized it's kind of a thing I do on every show, and I probably should stop doing that. But you can.
I spelled mine.
What's that?
I spelled mine.
Oh, okay. I forgot. Yeah, yours was first. That's why I forget. Yeah. So, yeah, you're Hacker's Health as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, you mentioned that one probably.
Were you paying attention?
I was asleep. The Rams are playing the Niners, and no. Anyway, so you can follow me on Twitter, Bryan Brake. You can follow the official podcast at BrakeSec, and if you want to join our Slack, you can send us a DM to BrakeSec, or you can send us an email to bds.podcast@gmail.com, and one of our moderators or myself will approve you. And we do have a code of conduct. We are I would like to say an apolitical zone, but we're a non-political. Our code of conduct specifically says no political discussions of any kind. And so we try to keep that as a trouble-free zone as much as possible. So come on down.
Please and thank you. I most appreciate that.
Yeah, my philosophy on that is there's a Brazilian other places to go to for political diatribe, and if there's one shining island of non-politicalness, I'd like it to be at least the Slack. So we're not only not talking about politics on our Slack, but we have events and stuff. JB, Dave, you guys are doing the book club up soon?
Yeah, we're going to ramp it back up really soon, sometime after the holidays.
Okay.
I believe, unless the community votes differently, going to get into the pen testing in the AWS cloud book, and probably do some kind of a special surprise and a recap for attacking network protocols from James Forshaw. So stay tuned for that.
Right on.
Mm.
Yeah, cool.
Good times.
Yep. We've actually had the authors of several of these books on the book club itself to talk about their books or to go over their various chapters. So it's more than just a typical, the Oprah book club or the BrakeSec book club. It's like sometimes you'll have, who was one of the authors y'all had on?
Well,
Me.
David had in the summer a really fun. We had a great talk with Evan. What was his name?
Evan Ratliff wrote The Mastermind, and we had Joseph Men, who wrote The Cult of the Dead Cow. I mean, just as examples. I mean, it blows my mind, right? The people who write the book, whether it's Chris Sanders, when we did Attacking Network Protocols, came on. We had Michael Leary, who wrote Cyber Operations, come on. We had one of the authors of How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity. All these people come on. They're willing to answer questions, talk about their books. And I mean, we've already bought their book, right? They get nothing out of it other than spending the time with us to help us get more out of their book. And it ends up being so much fun for everybody. I mean, JB's pointing out the conversation we had with Evan Ratliff. It was just a good time. And Joseph
and
Men.
a huge shout out
Fantastic.
To Dave for that.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, any author that will get in touch with me, I try to get them to come and just hang out with us for one evening. And when they do, it's just so much fun.
That's awesome.
It's great. I love it.
Cool. Yeah. One of the other things we do is our regular CTF club. I forget, Serial Pony, or I think he goes at pony_SEC on Twitter. He runs our CTF club. So, every Saturday he'll get on and run through a vulnerable VM that's been retired, like with Hack the Box, because we have a custom lab dedicated for BrakeSec for Hack the Box VMs that have been retired. So, he'll get on a Zoom with, some folks and walk through some issues. We're looking at trying to do like online CTFs that are happening, that are, competition based. We have a sim and logging club. I forget who runs that now. I know Scott helped start it, and then has kind of given it over. But, if you have logging or sim issues or detection issues, you can always get up on there and discuss with anybody in the channel, but also, on the call to how, I do this on Splunk and this doesn't work, or my Graylog does this and I don't know why. And, you can get some real good advice from that. All right. So I don't have anything else. Does anybody have any last thoughts or words of hopefully encouragement?
I think it'd be cool to point out use those ideas of the channels and the different clubs that we do on BrakeSec to start things in your own communities or in your own work. We've got the Slack covered, of course, and you've got the podcast. But like, for example, I started a book club at work based on the book club here, and also the Lean-In program from Sheryl Sandberg.
Nice.
Where we encourage women and other people from outside of Infosec to come. And that's, we've literally recruited people into Infosec internally from that. It's such an amazing experience.
Very cool. Okay. Any last, anyone else? I'll take silence as a no. So, all right. Well, this has been Bryan and David and Amanda and Karen and Scott and JB and Mr. Betcher and Miss Roddy for breaking down security and our community here. Have a great rest of your year. Take care of yourselves. We do have a mental health channel in the Slack, so if you are feeling a little down, don't hesitate to come on in or say something, or don't hesitate to reach out to a professional if you feel like you might do something. So there's no shame in getting help. So have a great rest of your year. Be kind to one another. Hopefully it's a little easier in the holiday season, and take care of yourself, because you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again next year.
Bye, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, everybody. Happy New Year.